Welcome to the Power of the Purse podcast, the only show connecting women professionals to their peers. This isn't just about money. This is about life. And now the host of the Power of the Purse podcast, Lynn S. Evans.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lynn S. Evans, and I am the host of Power of the Purse podcast. There was a time in my life not too long ago when I believed three things about money. One, women are not supposed to talk about or be included in any conversations about money. Two, women don't have the natural ability to understand anything about money. And three, men know best how to manage money. And those truths I made up about money guided me for years until I realized money was not a foreign language or some other obscure academic exercise. And it was something I could not only understand but teach to other women. Too many times I've heard stories from women who ought to know better but didn't, until they were forced to, because of divorce, widowhood, job loss, or the approach of retirement. This podcast will add another chapter to an ongoing, informative conversation about financial topics women should be more knowledgeable about. My mission is to help women reduce their financial illiteracy and develop a healthy relationship with money. With that in mind, my guest today is Joy Loverde. Joy is a keynote speaker and an author. Her most recent book is Who Will Take Care of Me When I'm Old? And she's also the author of another book, The Complete Elder Care Planner. Welcome, Joy.
Thank you, Lynn.
I'm so glad you're here. We have so many things to talk about. I can't wait to get into this. So let's first of all talk about the fact that you have had quite, and I want to say, an in-depth experience, both as a caregiver and as someone who has observed aging. So I'm in the same situation. I have a husband who has dementia, and so I am the primary caregiver in that situation. But I'm fascinated about this, who will take care of me when I'm old? It's one of those questions that a lot of times we don't really want to confront that one. And especially if we don't have children, it's even scarier. So tell me about what prompted you to write that book?
Well, when the first book came out, The Complete Elder Care Planner, it was back in the early 80s. And I saw the writing on the wall, having come from a large Italian family where we all took care of each other. And I thought everybody did that in other families, but I was terribly wrong. And I kept hearing stories about families that were being torn apart because they did not talk about elder care and caring for the other members of the family. So time went on. I wrote the book that I was hoping would get people to start talking. And inevitably, after my keynote talks, people would come up to me afterward and they would say to me, you know, I love taking care of my parents. I'm doing a great job and I'm thankful that I'm in this position. But my parents have me, but who do I have? And that got the wheels turning. Now, it was way too early to start talking about the second book that just came out. This is way back when the focus was still on aging parents. But I heard the message loud and clear a long time ago, at least 10 years ago. And I started to say, that will be the next book. And that is how now I've come full circle with this topic. First, it's our parents and people we love, including our spouses and siblings and friends. And now it's us.
Yeah. Yeah. Now it is. I look at this and I see, you know, I'm a baby boomer woman myself, and I see all of this playing out with my contemporaries, my friends. All of them are really in a situation where they're taking care of their parents, either parent or parents. And the issue, I went through that myself when my mom passed away a few years ago. She decided that after her second husband died, that she was going to move at 80 years old. She was going to move to Philadelphia and live next to my sister. who had been there for 30-some years. So it became true, of my sister is the one who's the predominant caregiver. She also happens to be a registered nurse and one who does geriatric nursing. So she was perfect for this role. But on the other side of it is, I have another sibling, and the three of us, I think for the most part, we're trying to figure out how do we do this and what's fair. I think that's the big issue. What's fair? Yeah. So my brother, who lives in Florida, couldn't very easily come to Philadelphia and take his turn, so to speak, on a weekly basis. And then I live 2 hours north of there. So in addition to that, I have a husband who has dementia. So we have a lot of things that were going on back and forth. But I remember that conversation the three of us had, the siblings, about how are we going to do this? How are we going to take care of Mom? And it was a question, well, I shouldn't say it's a question. It's a conversation that is not had often enough until people reach that point where they have to make a decision. And I always put that in quotes. We need to have that conversation with parents. Because when I do the financial advising for people, usually it's a retirement plan. Everybody thinks about themselves and how they're going to live in retirement, but they forget about the fact that they may be called upon to be caregivers. And nobody thinks about that or the cost of doing that. So
and then
when I look at all that,
I'm just going to say sometimes that they find out the hard way that their parents have already run out of money.
Yes. Yeah.
It's
because nobody
horrible.
wants to talk about it.
Exactly.
So do you have any advice in your book about how to broach that conversation with parents?
Well, I love what you said about the gathering of the siblings and realizing that you are all resources. So my advice to people who do have siblings is you talk to each other first without the parent being involved, and just say, we need to talk about this, and make sure that everybody agrees that talking about it might be a wise thing to do. And don't be surprised if one of the siblings says, no, there's really nothing to talk about. We don't need to do this. Mom's fine. Right? There could be a little bit of denial in that conversation. It's not easy for everybody to have these conversations. Have the conversation anyway, even if someone does not want to step up to the plate. At least you'll be 3/4 of the way covered, right? With the conversation. Yes. And then you approach the parent and basically say, your money is a family affair. We don't necessarily need to know exactly what you have in the bank. That's not our goal here. The goal is to make sure that you have enough money to cover long-term care, and it goes from there. And at that point, anything goes. This is a creative process depending on who's in the conversation.
The other thing I wanted to say to you that I don't know if you've noticed this, but I have. This is a conversation that is not something that is an ongoing conversation from generations before, because the assumption was that we all, as the term goes, aged in place, and we had multi-generational families living under one roof. We don't have that anymore. We haven't had that for maybe 2 generations. And now
it's front and center, but there's something else to remember, and that is that we, the baby boomer women, are the last generation of family caregivers as we have known it. So that this is because there is no guarantee. We did not raise our children, if we have children, to be staying at home under one roof, stay close to home, and look out for your parents. It's not how we raised them. and they love and adore us for the most part, or at least we would hope. But we did not raise them to be caregivers. We educated them. We kicked them out of the house, and we said, "Go do. I'll give you all I got," and then bam, you're on your own. And so this is not what our parents said to us at all. They said, "Hey, I'm your mother, I'm your father. Stay close." That's a whole different world.
It is. And that's why I'm saying I think that there really is not a precedent for us to follow that would tell us what to do. There are no infrastructures in the government or anywhere else. We're all kind of out there floundering and finding our own way. And it's just an amazing thing to me that this is such an important piece of people's lives. And it can, in my case, I've been dealing with my husband's dementia now for 15 years. And it's just not something I ever bargained for. None of us ever do. But nobody ever had that conversation with me. No relatives, no friends, nothing. It's always been, how can we help you? Okay, and I get that, and that's a good thing, and I'm glad they do that. But the structures don't exist for us to be able to figure out what do we do with this?
That's right, and we have to get as educated as we can when situations are upon us. We could never anticipate the dementia of a spouse or someone we love. However, the good news is the associations that are engaged in these different chronic illnesses have evolved to the point where they are incredible resources for all of us. And it allows us to catch up quickly if there are no plans in place. So my advice is the first place you go, if you are a caregiver for someone with a chronic illness, is to the association that will give an enormous amount of support immediately.
That's a great piece of advice. Besides that, tell me something about your website, Elder Industry. That's an interesting name. Was that designed to be a resource as well?
Yes, it is. The reason I chose that name is because I was always going to be open to whatever eldering evolved into. So if I kept the name large and under the umbrella can fall many things. And now you can see that it includes us. So here we are with this industry called us. So elderindustry.com.
That's a great name.
Yeah, it just keeps it open. Who knows? Maybe there's going to be robots pretty soon. It's like,
Well, I guess it is an option in this world. They drive our cars and they do everything. So I guess so. But let me ask you something else. I was reading some of the, reviews or comments about your book and about some of your speaking engagements. There was one that really stuck out for me, and I'd love to have you talk about this. This one was something about it's not health, it's not wealth, but a robust social network that makes a difference in aging. Tell me about that, what you mean by a robust social network, and how does that trump health and wealth?
Well, let me paint a picture for you and your listeners. I have seen over and over again the support and love of people who don't have any money in the bank. They are all currently just surviving on Social Security. Many of these people are in their 80s and 90s and even older. But what they do have is a social network that comes to their aid at any given time, day or night, and true love and care has been developed over the years. And so this idea about social connection, especially for those who haven't got as much money as they thought they would have in their later years, to know that if you could get really good at being a friend and helping a friend far before they need care or you need care, there's a good chance that you'll be just fine when the time comes that you will need some kind of support. This is missing in our mobile mindsets these days, and also people who think that they have true friends through social media. Nothing could be further than the truth.
You know, that's true. And you just made me think of a conversation I had yesterday with a client, and we were talking about retirement planning and projecting out a certain number of years. And we always use by default age 97 because we kind of figure people who, you know, that's pretty much a major achievement if you get to 97. And so if you can get to 97 and still have something left, that's really a good job. But I said something to her about that, and I was looking at the numbers, and she said, I'm never going to live that long. I said, how do you know that? She said, because I won't. Mm-hmm. I said, well, why do you know that you're not going to live that long? She said, well, I have a woman who's, I will call her my godmother, and she's 93 years old. She's very sad. And I said, why is she very sad? And she said, because all of her friends are gone. And she doesn't have the friendships and the social networks that she used to have. And I said, you know, I never thought about that. But, you know, I know that my mom had the same situation. She had a group of friends who had been friends for over 50 years. And one by one, as they got into their 80s, they died. And there was a tremendous sense of loss. And it wasn't just that they lost a friend, they lost that social network, which was really something that had sustained them for years and years. And I never really thought about the power of that. And that's, I guess, why when I looked at that quote that was there about having a robust social network makes all the difference in the world, it really connected to me because of what the client had said yesterday. And I just wonder, how do you deal with that? How do you maintain that social network, which is so critical in your 90s?
Well, it starts with the mindset that we will always and forever be surrounded by a revolving door of people around us. And there's a real good chance that the people we know today will not be the people who will care for us in the long run. And if we look forward in the future to this reality of who's going to be there, and we learn that this is more natural than not, we won't push against it so hard, and we will begin to see other people in a new light. There will be new and different connections as we grow old. People we never thought we would be friends with. Young, old, black, gay, you name it. Everybody has the potential to be a close and loving friend when you have this kind of mindset. And this is what it's going to take to be surrounded socially and otherwise as we grow old. It's the natural way to do it. Yeah.
I just think that loneliness is one of the saddest things to see in people as they age. And I think it's the mindset. You're right. But how do you get people who are maybe chronically ill, who really don't have mobility? How do you get them into a social network?
You can't if they don't want it. But what we can do is we can anticipate it for ourselves. Now, I used to tell my mom when she was alive, Mom, let's go do something. And she would, her knee-jerk reaction was always no. Okay? I couldn't do anything about it. Yes, this was her choice, but she was happy in her choice. If I see, and I see it over and over again, that this is the reality of all of us. I mean, one of the things we have to plan for is to age solo. We can't just think there's always going to be people around us. And it's going to take effort to remain relevant in this world. And this is the other thing. So you asked me the question about how do you get other people to do X? You can't. All we can do is influence them. I don't care if you're talking about eat right, exercise, be social. It doesn't matter.
You're right. You're absolutely
It's their
right.
choice. their choice. So I don't live for other people's choices. What I do is I say this most likely what I'm visualizing right now with this other person will probably happen with me, chronic illness or not. I have the choice to make, I have an idea of making better choices for myself if this is what I want. It's always going to depend on me. You know, I will determine so much and I will be in control of so much. But if I choose not to make plans and not to know the reality of old age, I'll just do myself in nice and early, like your friend who says I'll never live that long. If she doesn't want to live that long, she won't.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's everybody's prerogative. I think that everybody we should all respect other people's choices with regard to, if they say you're not going to live to very long, you say, well, you probably, that's your reality and that's how things might go. And just to respect that. No different than how people want to die.
Yes, that's true. Never thought about it that way. Yeah. You have to just respect it. That's how it is.
Yeah, but then if we have a different point of view, then we have to make the effort to make different plans.
Well, what would you say? I'm curious to know what your answer is about this because there could be so many different answers. But what would you say is the one fallacy that people have about aging that you have found to be so wrong?
The one thing probably
one thing that just pops up.
My thoughts immediately went to the attitude of who they become when they are diagnosed with a chronic illness. All right? Now, what I'm saying is, do we become our illness? Or are we still the person we are who happens to be managing a chronic illness? Do we let that illness define us? Over and over again, I see people who immediately give up because they've been diagnosed with something and they go down a different road. And then that's where the fork in the road. And yet I've seen other people who are diagnosed with something, a chronic something or other, and they take another route and they say, it doesn't matter. I'm going to live with this. I'm going to do the best I can in the moment. And I'm just going to surround myself by being educated, surrounding myself with people who accept me for who I am and keep going forward. So,
I think
hope.
When you see, that's the word is hope. When you see people in that situation, I often think about a guy who completely beat the odds, mostly because of his attitude and his social network, and that's President Jimmy Carter. His family, I forget how many siblings he had, and they all died of some form of cancer. He actually, was diagnosed with cancer and used some immunological treatment, which may not have existed for his siblings, but he actually beat it. And he's living a very full life, and he is still going at 90-something. And I'm amazed when I think about that, because that's attitude. That's a decision to live a certain way, irrespective of that type of chronic illness, and just keep going. And maybe his siblings didn't do that.
Correct. I have a very good friend who just had a massive stroke, and he is quite challenged now, thinking, walking, talking, and just as you would expect. And my being together with him my mindset and how we are together has not changed one iota. Where I say, you want to go to the movies with me? Let's go for a walk. Let's do this. Let's do that. And he gives me that look, and I say, come on, and just he chooses to say yes or no or whatever. But I don't treat my loved ones differently because they are living with the symptoms of some sort of chronic illness. And I suspect that the older we get, I also realize that something's going to get me too. And what am I going to do when I'm in that situation? Well, I would like to think that I will continue to be me in spite of my aches and pains.
Well, we'd like to think that, and I think that's the point, is that you have to make yourself think that way.
Right. It's all about your mindset.
One other question I want to ask you about your book, and not so much the most recent one, the one you wrote before, The Complete Elder Care Planner. Why did you decide to write that book?
My journey in elder care started when I was in high school, and I went to an all-girls Catholic high school, and I was a freshman, and the nun walked into the room early in the year when none of us knew each other, and she was looking around the room, and she said, "Who's going to go to the nursing home on Thanksgiving morning with me?" And I raised my hand and volunteered because I thought it would be a good thing to do for extra credit. And
that's good.
I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So I went with her. I was the only one. I thought, oh, good. I'm 14 years old, 1966, and we walk into this place, and 7 people are sitting there in the dark on Thanksgiving morning. Now, as a 14-year-old, I cannot comprehend what is happening here, but all I know is something's terribly wrong. I was going to go home to a house full of people, and the house smelled good, and with food and music and animals and cousins and aunts and uncles running around all over the place. And so I couldn't shake the visual that I had seen a couple hours earlier. That woke me up. And from that day on, I said, well, the only thing that's missing, as far as I know, is that people don't know how to talk to each other about the future. And my family, we always sat down for Sunday dinners, and we knew how to do this. So all I did is I said, I bet if I could just tell people what they need to talk about and all the questions to ask, that might help. So it wasn't until I was it was 20 years later that I wrote the first edition of the book, the Complete Elder Care Planner, and that came out in the 80s. And that was even at a time before people were talking about elder care, because child care was the big thing. And all the corporate America was saying, child care, bring your kids to work and drop them off at our on-site daycare center. And everybody thought that was the greatest thing in the world. And I was saying, no, you got to pay attention. It's elder care. It's coming up. And they would look at me and they'd say, what's elder care? And that was the beginning. That was that.
Well, when did you decide that you needed to become an author? What inspired you to do that, to actually write a book? I'm only asking that because, I wrote one too. But I wrote it because, for me, it was after 30 years of collecting stories and things that I thought would be important to pass on. But you're talking about doing this after an experience when you were 14. So when did you write the book? How old were you when you wrote that first book?
I was 40 years old when I wrote the book, just because between the age of 14 and 40, I was still going to nursing homes and trying to fix a problem I could never solve. And it was my frustration at the compounding of the needs of the old people that I kept on seeing every Thanksgiving, that my mind would not shut off what I knew to be true. So that was the reason for putting my thoughts in writing about what to talk about, how to talk about it, and all the questions to ask, so that my involvement with seeing people who are alone on a day when they should be with others, my continuous involvement just kept compounding to a point where I said, something must be done, and I can't possibly go visit every person in the world at a nursing home on Thanksgiving. So putting my thoughts in writing and then getting a publisher was the only way to go.
That sounds great. But did you sell it to somebody or did you self-publish?
The first 3 editions of the workbook that I had put together, I couldn't even keep them in stock. People found out about it, and I was running around to the post office, and I said, "This is ridiculous." And finally, I found an agent who sold it to Random House, and that
Wonderful.
was a good story. It was the right time, the right message, and there you go. I'm pretty sure the guy upstairs, God, was watching over me saying, "Yep, we'll get this out there."
Yes, exactly. Get the message out there. It's important.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me switch this around a little bit because I'm very curious to know, as I do for all my guests, to find out something about your experience with money, because I think that has a significant role in how your life develops and the choices that you make. So let's go back to some of those questions that you may have seen or not. But one of the first ones I like to talk about is, what's your first memory about money?
Wow. I was entrepreneurial the day I was born. I'm really clear about that. No, when I was about 4 years old, I had a candy store, and I sold candy to my friends. I didn't even know how to count, but I knew. And I would I don't know where that came from, but it's so me. I'm like, I have candy, you want candy, I can sell you candy. And so there I was as a 4-year-old hawking candy. And I loved it. I loved the process. Oh, I would go to, little candies that my mom would buy. Yeah, this penny candy from Walgreens that we would buy for a penny. And I would put it in a box. And I remember, it's clear as day, I would line them up on the sidewalk, real pretty. And I lived in a neighborhood where all the kids gathered all the time. Our parents never worried about us. We were always playing outside.
Yeah.
And there I was with my candy store. That was my first experience.
Okay, so that was your first experience with making money. But do you remember anything about when people gave you money, like for birthdays or holidays? What did you do with it?
Oh, I definitely put it in the bank. I never spent it. I got the idea that money meant security, and plus I came from a family where we always had what we needed, and so quite conservative, 5 children in this large Italian family, and my father and mother made sure we were all educated, and you just don't spend money on fancy cars and big houses. You just buy what you need and put the rest in the bank.
And you went to Catholic schools, right? So they were
all
private schools.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, all of us.
And then when it got to college time, did your parents pay for that, or did you pay for it yourself or split it?
No, they paid for it as long as we worked.
Okay.
And we did. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that was a lot you learned about money.
I
Whether you
did.
acknowledge it or not, it was a lot of training.
There was a lot of training going on. They were always fair, and but they taught us the value of working hard. We didn't associate doing homework with the value of money. We didn't talk about it in those ways, but there was a certain expectation of having good grades and doing your homework. We would all sit on the kitchen table together. So it had to do with, this is the payback. When you're studying hard, this is why I'm paying, so that you get educated. So there was a connection there between working hard, not giving up, and being secure and being smart with your money.
Well, that's good. At least that's, I think, the way most people would say that's a good foundation.
It was a good foundation.
What jobs? You mentioned you had jobs when you were in college. What jobs or careers have you had in your life?
Well, I think my most memorable job was a job that was highly social. Here in Chicago, there was a company called Andy Frayne. Andy Frayne is a crowd control company. They don't exist anymore. But when you would go to Soldier Field or Wrigley Field or the auditorium or orchestra hall to be seated, or the racetracks, you would be seated by an Andy Frayne usher or usherette. So this was very social in terms of learning how to be customer friendly and yet get the job done. Now, the funny thing is sometimes someone would be sitting in someone else's seat and they both had the same tickets. And boy, all hell would break loose in the middle of a, because the computers weren't around then. And so we had to break up fist fights and everything else. And one time one guy got dragged out of Orchestra Hall while Chicago Symphony was playing a beautiful song.
Oh my God! Well, what is the resolution to that? If both
you get a big guy, you just get a big guy to get them both out of there, and then you reseat someone who's willing to be kind and But you don't do it if you're a little 16-year-old, or you don't do that one yourself. You get a big guy.
So then you moved on to bigger and better things. So what did you do after that?
Well, then I became a mother, and this is the 70s now, and I sure didn't have to work because wasn't required of me. Being a mother was enough, or so I thought. And my divorce with a 4-year-old with not a dime in the bank and the house taken away from me was my wake-up call.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So then how did you get yourself out of that one?
Well, the first thing that happened is my mother took me and my daughter in, and I am forever grateful to her. And she then promptly fed us so that we wouldn't starve to death, and looked at me straight in the eye and said, "You get your act together and get a job and get this thing settled for yourself and never ever look back." And
wow,
great go from there. Yeah. So I was with her, and my daughter and I were with her for about 6 months, which seemed like an eternity, but there wasn't a minute of the day that I did not spend getting a job, looking for an apartment, learning how to do everything myself. And the rest is history, as they say.
Well, then what kind of job did you get when you first found a job after the divorce?
A good friend of mine suggested that I go to her advertising agency and learn how to be a secretary at the time in the creative department. And so I did. She opened the door for me. And once I was there, I realized that I had quite a knack for marketing and understanding the concepts of good marketing and communication. And so I learned the skills. I was a secretary, but I was also learning from the people around me who were doing the actual jobs that I eventually took over. And so,
okay.
Yeah. And this is why the success of my books are both based on solid marketing and communication, which means you learn how to communicate and package things so that they make sense, especially when there is a involved and complex subject to be sold. And both of my books are formatted in a way that are understandable and clear and just get to the point right away.
That's wonderful. That's a good way to do it. I mean, I just think that the workbook sold like crazy. So that says a lot to your ability to put it in language that people can grasp and want to know more.
And that's because I was lucky to land my first job with my 4-year-old at an advertising agency that taught me everything I know now.
Good. So here's another question for you. What are the events that have happened in your life that you would describe as defining moments?
The divorce very much was my wake-up call. That, as I had said earlier, I realized the mistake that I had made in putting my eggs in someone else's basket, and I will never, ever do that again.
Oh, I think I've heard those words before. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not saying from you, but that's exactly what my book is about. Let's not go there again, ladies. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what about, what would you say are distractions in your life right now? And how do they stop you?
I don't have distractions. I'm pretty focused.
That's good.
I'm real clear. I practice meditation. I follow my instincts. I don't see anything really as a distraction. I see most of my life, whatever is happening, as an experience, either to learn from or to gain from. But I don't have the word distraction in my life.
That's great. That's to stay that focused is a wonderful thing. So,
well,
do you
it
ever
takes
see yourself
discipline.
being retired? Yes, it does.
Yeah. No, I don't. Even if the definition is not making money anymore, the answer is no. And the reason is because my husband and I have also invested in real estate, and this is how we are going to we're going to be financing the rest of our lives. So that will take managing those properties. No, I'll be protecting our assets till the day that I don't need to anymore. Sell them off.
That sounds good. Okay,
yeah.
I like it. So if there's no such thing, I have to tell you that I have, I think 58, 59, somewhere in there, podcasts. And every time I ask that question, I have not had any one woman that I've talked to yet say to me, yes, I can't wait until I retire. Nobody says that anymore. You know, that whole definition of retirement as being a point where you stop working and your assets take care of you for the rest of your life. I don't know of anybody who does that.
At least
I don't
women.
think we were raised that way. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It's a wonderful thing. I think it's a refreshing way to look at it, because I think there's that old story about a line of demarcation. 65 is the arbitrary time. And I understand that it was based on normal life expectancy around Social Security. So Social Security never intended for people to live into their 80s and 90s. That was never the design. But people still hang on to that age 65 as the normal retirement age. And it's so not who we are as baby boomers, because we recognize there could be a good 25 to 30 years more of our lives, and we're not just going to stop and roll up into some kind of a ball and sit in the corner and suck our thumbs. It ain't going to be like that. So I'm glad to hear you say that. I thank you for that. And let me just say, I think we've kind of exhausted our timeline here. So thanks to my guest, Joy Loverde. And Joy, tell people how they can get in touch with you if they have some additional questions or if they'd like to buy your book.
The easiest way to get in touch with me is to visit my website, and on there you will find my email and phone number and everything else. And my website is elderindustry.com.
That's a good one. Now I understand why. I wasn't sure what it meant, but now I get it, and I think it's good. So to all of you in my Power of the Purse community, I hope today's podcast was helpful in enriching your understanding of important financial matters and how some knowledge of money can go a long way to easing the burdens of life. Thanks again, Joy, for sharing your time and knowledge. And until the next time, thanks for listening. And remember, money is not the enemy. Your ignorance of it is. Goodbye for now.
Thanks again, and join us next time to explore more ways you can take control of your finances and your life.